Welcome to Unscripted. Today we have Balaji with us, who is the co-founder of an education company called Ability. I really like this company because they are trying to build a technology-enabled platform to help kids with special needs. And he'll talk more about why that company. But before that, Balaji, maybe you can tell us a bit about yourself.
Right.
Where are you from? Where were you born? Maybe a quick synopsis of your life journey.
Oh, right.
And how you've ended up today building Ability, which is a great idea and very much needed in the world. But let's go way back.
Right.
Where were you born and how did you end up here?
Right. So I'm from south of India, Chennai. I was born in Tamil Nadu. I grew up in this town called Coimbatore, which is an industrial town, a town full of entrepreneurs. So every other person would be doing their own business. Is what the culture of that town was, and even when I was in school, we used to run business. We used to sell, indoor plants, pickles, whatever we could get our hands on. So by the time I finished my degree in business, we had already run like 4 different businesses, making enough money to eat outside every time, which was like quite a luxury at that time. And it taught me quite a few things. And I was never cut out to work in a company. So between 92 when I finished my degree to 99, I had started like 30 different ventures.
30?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot.
So I was good at starting, but not really good at running.
You're one of those. Lots of ideas.
Exactly.
Get excited, try to do something,
Yeah.
and then it falls off. Okay, it sounds very familiar because I'm like that too.
So that was kind of I call it my 8-year MBA. So from 92 to 99. But the thing was, we ran quite a few successful businesses in that 30. There were a handful that kind of made money. There was many that lost a lot of money. And around 96, 97, I kind of knew that I had to do something differently because this is not the playbook for happiness or success.
Right.
And I also felt that Coimbatore was like a really small town, right? In the sense that I wanted to know how does like a sophisticated business operate, and so that led me to learn a lot more with computers. I kind of learned myself. Rented a computer at that time for a few months and learned a bunch of things. It kind of changed my perspective. At that time, one of the businesses we were running was like a consulting business, so helping companies set up their processes. And I realized quickly that computers makes a huge difference. Because we were dependent so much on training people and getting them to do things rightly.
And this is 96, 97?
This was like 95 actually.
So this is very early.
Yeah.
Personal computers are not a household item.
Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, we kind of had used computers all the way from 93. We had a business, and in today's Singapore dollars, it was $2,000 was the investment, and $1,500 was the cost of the computer. So that was like our investment.
Right.
So we had always used computers in what we did, maybe not very effectively, but we bought into that vision very early. And but I kind of got really into computers. Like I wanted to program, and I wanted to, because this is better than training people or and you create a process and it works all the time. So it changed my perspective in terms of how to go about things, and I learned computers. And but at the time, financially, I was also more than broke. So I had, at that time there was no startup capital. You had to borrow money.
Right.
And I had borrowed money at 50-60% per annum.
Wow, 50% interest rate per
Interest
annual.
rate, yeah.
Wow, and this is in Coimbatore.
In Coimbatore.
Loan sharks.
Yeah. I mean, but that was kind of not very abnormal. So like 36% was quite the normal business rate at that time actually.
Wow. Compare that to today.
Yeah. Today is like a dream.
Zero.
Yeah, exactly. Today is a dream. So at that time, I had so much loans which were more than all the property my family owned. So but nobody knew about it. But so I was like, okay, I need to do something about this now. And I also learned enough computing at that point. And one of the options was to get out of India, work somewhere, pay back the loans.
Right.
And which kind of brought me to Singapore.
Okay.
A cousin of mine was here, and I helped him on a project. And he was like, do you know how to program? I was like, yeah, kind of, not I'm just starting to learn. He was like, yeah, you have an instinct for it. You should really take this seriously. And he got me into a company here. And I was super lucky to come to Singapore and work for International SOS.
Oh, the International SOS, as in the company that, well, it's not an insurance company, it's
emergency medical
assistance. That's right, yeah.
So I came to International SOS at a fantastic time. I was like super lucky. So the corporate IT team was like less than 10 people.
Right. So super early days.
I mean, they were a couple of $100 million in revenue at that time. But they were acquiring companies and they were growing at 10-15% a year. And that was really interesting. It was a global company. And being in corporate IT meant I had the opportunity to think global systems. For somebody with my experience to have something like that was like a super gift.
And this is what you wanted anyways. You wanted to get involved in something bigger than just a small city in Coimbatore, right?
Totally. And the sophistication with which International SOS ran was mind-boggling for me, coming from
What
Coimbatore.
year was this?
This was 99.
Wow. Okay. 20 years ago.
20 years ago. And so I spent until about 2012 in International SOS. And then I consulted for them a while after. So, and in that process, I had built global case management systems. I had built their invoicing system. So, like integrating globally was what I did, which was fantastic experience.
Right. So you were doing product, you were doing strategy, you were doing integrations.
Right.
So I'm guessing all your knowledge of computers that you self-taught yourself in Coimbatore came to very useful.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Then what did you do after International SOS?
So after International SOS, I had this idea. I mean, at that time, I became very interested in behavior change. How computing or like mobile apps were like iPhone had launched a few years ago, and how you could use tech for behavior change was becoming more and more viable and an interesting idea. So it kind of I got very interested in it. I learned how to do that. And at the time, the idea was we would take self-help books and convert them into games. So because you read a self-help book, but after a while you forget everything you read.
Right.
You never take, or it's very hard to take it to your life.
Right.
So we thought we would build an app, and I created a company called Nudge Labs.
Nudge Labs, that's right. I remember we talked about this a long time ago.
Right.
Yeah.
So Nudge Labs was created with the view to, do tech that will change behaviors, particularly around health and personal finance and areas where people wanted to make a change.
Were you working at International SOS during that time, or you left to start your own thing?
I left to start my own thing.
So Nudge Labs was You're venture number 36, 37.
Yes, that's right.
Right. Okay. And then, so how long did Nudge Labs last, and were there any successes, failures in Nudge Labs?
So Nudge Labs, so it kind of became a consulting company soon, and we did projects around education. We did projects around medical adherence, disease prevention. So there were quite a number of interesting projects, and one of the clients for us at that time was Zulig Pharma.
Zurich Pharma.
Zulig.
Zulig. Okay. The German.
They are like Swiss, but
Okay.
their headquarters is in Philippines, and so they are quite big in the sense they are about 10 billion in size, the largest distributor in pharma distributor in Asia, and it was fascinating. At one point of time, we thought maybe I should join them, work as an employee, so that we could do some ambitious projects from inside, because as a consultant there are limitations. And I joined them, and one of the areas that I wanted to focus at that time was if we could change the narrative around disease prevention, instead of taking a defensive posture and saying, okay, don't get diabetes. Can we change it to peak performance? Can we do something interesting? And it was early days. So we built a diabetes prevention product, which I think still works. And if I'm not wrong, like 1 million people are covered using that.
Wow. So you started Nudge Labs as your own venture. It became a consulting company. You started consulting larger companies on technology as well as other things.
Right.
One of your clients was Zulik Pharma,
Yeah.
and you ended up joining Zulik Pharma to work on this
Yeah.
disease, diabetes prevention.
Yeah.
Was it
An app.
So it was an app.
It was an app, but it was app plus.
Right.
So it was part of like a corporate
Right.
health program.
Right.
So by 2016, I left because I'm not very I have been always like this guy who would run a business,
Right.
who would do his own startup. I was trying to do that. The reason why I left Internationalize was also when it kind of got to a point where the company was so big that you can't do ventures inside the company, so you can't do your own projects. At some point of time, it is not appropriate
Right.
to get individuals do whatever they want to do.
Sure. But you were very much involved in building this diabetes prevention application at the pharma company.
Yeah.
So it was sort of like you were doing a startup within a big company, but
Right.
you didn't really have full, direction or maybe full control. So
Yeah, I would say that the constraints for a big company are slightly different. Maybe I wasn't very sensitive to that, and maybe what I was expecting was a lot from a big company. I didn't know or want to navigate that.
Right.
I think because it has a lot of power. Big companies can do
Sure.
cool stuff if
Sure.
you know how to navigate it.
Sure.
But I didn't have the patience or the temperament to do it. So I had always felt I'm better off on my own.
Right.
And 2016 I left. I went to US, to San Francisco to study startups. I wanted to get back properly. Start as a kid in this. Start from scratch was the idea. Went to a boot camp in San Francisco, met with hundreds of people to understand what could be done, and then I started one more venture, which you know a lot about. We have discussed quite a bit.
Oh, right. So this is when the first time we met.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 years ago?
2017 or 18,
Right.
I think we met.
2018. And you were working on, let's see if I can remember, you were working on automation of supply chain,
Right.
But you were doing physical products?
Right. I mean, our goal was to basically, one of the natural progression from behavior change
Yeah.
was, can we use chatbots and AI like a promptware, so that it can prompt you at right things at the right time,
Right.
so that you could do better and better. Right.
And you had been working on that idea for a while.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
I remember.
Correct. I
And
mean,
you were
even
burnt out.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the seeds of this idea actually even was in the diabetes prevention. So I was briefly involved in another project where we were trying to build a Parkinson's management app. So the thinking was, you always kind of have like a chatbot that can talk to you and provide the right advice at the right time. And when I left Zulik, I wanted to take a break from healthcare because it was it had a lot of constraints, and I wanted to have a fresher mind. So I went to completely a different topic, like helping salespeople.
Right.
With this.
Right.
And we did some cool stuff, but we focused on like small businesses in the food supply chain, and we're trying to crack that problem of making it easier for a salesperson to to do it.
Right. But that venture didn't really take off.
Oh no, not at all. I mean, actually, I had a couple of investors who have been kind and still kind after having lost their money in the process.
Right. So did you shut that company down?
I did actually a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, well, congratulations, I suppose.
Yeah, no, totally.
And your investors how do they feel about it?
I mean, I think I couldn't have asked more from the investors. They have been nothing but kind.
Right. And they were angel investors.
They were angel investors, and so they wrote me a check for a slide deck, and they didn't get much back for it, but they've been super kind. Greg, one of the investors, when he gave me the check, he told me, Amazon today is $800. Right, so I'm betting on you instead of Jeff Bezos.
Right, right.
I was like, that's
no
a
pressure.
huge.
Wait, so how much capital did you end up raising for this venture that you recently shut down?
I had raised about 150,000, and I had put 150,000 of my own.
Right, and so those investors, you still have good relationships with them.
Yeah.
And then you took a break after that.
Yeah.
And you ended up going to New York.
To New York, yeah.
Right. So what was the thinking? It was like self-discovery, or?
I was burnt out. I wasn't really, I was trying to somehow make it work, but it didn't. And I just needed a break. A friend of mine who lives in New York said, "Hey, come and stay with me for a few months." So I took the offer, stayed at his place. I mean, New York is a great way to re-energize and
I love New York.
Rethink, and I love that city. It kind of met with hundreds of people. I think that has become like something that I've learned, to go to a new city and meet hundreds of people. And during that trip, I went to Vancouver and I did the same. So meeting like 50-60 people a week is fantastic.
And how were you going to meetups? How were you meeting these people?
Meetups. If there is any conference, I would volunteer there.
Right.
I would do all sorts of things to connect with people.
Right.
And so after like 6 months actually of doing that,
So you met a lot of people.
I met a lot of people. I met a lot of people.
Yeah.
And during that time, one of a friend I knew before, he works for a bank in New York, and he said, "Hey, my brother-in-law, who runs a school in India, he's looking to do something with tech. I think it would be, if you're up to it, let's do a call." And I was like, "Yeah, let's do a Zoom call." And we did a Zoom call, and it was like, there was like instant chemistry. We were like, yeah, we could do something together, was the feeling.
Right.
I wasn't thinking of doing anything in the edtech at that point, but I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk to people And after we spoke a few times, it became clear, hey, actually there is a lot of my experience could actually come in handy in thinking about edtech, maybe from a very different perspective. And so yeah, it kind of was very accidental, but the next 2-3 months of conversation, I was still in New York. It became clear that we will do this.
Right. So that's what led you to then start your current venture,
Yeah.
which is Ability.
Yeah.
And so did you go to India?
Yeah.
You checked out the school, and it was a special needs school?
No, not really. So at that time, I really didn't know special needs.
Right. It was not in your
any
radar.
Yeah, not in the radar.
Right.
So I come back from New York and then go and stay in the school.
In what city is
this is in Raipur, in central
Raipur,
India.
which is outside of Bangalore.
Yeah.
Which is a small town.
It's a kind of a tier 3, tier 4 town.
Well, small in India is
Small in
huge.
India is quite, there are like 1.6 million people
Right.
In that town.
In Raipur.
In Raipur.
Okay.
So I spent quite some time in the school. And Ashutosh, who is...
You were living in the school.
I was living in the school.
Right.
I was living in the school, and Ashutosh, who is now one of the co-founders. So I would sit in office and be part of many of the meetings, particularly from people who would come to sell their textbooks, would come to sell their software. We kind of saw a lot of really interesting ideas, of what people are doing about it.
Right. So you put yourself into a school, you lived and breathed the environment.
Yeah.
And when did the special needs niche, or I don't know if niche is the right word, but when did that become very clear to you?
So actually what happened was, we have been talking in that period when I was in the school, we were talking about how to, bring some modern methods for teaching. I've been a big advocate of, how do you, do online? How do you do blended learning? So these are some stuff that we have been talking about. And so there were like a summer class that we were planning to teach physics with completely new techniques in the sense that show kids cosmos, show kids the history of electromagnetism, and not make it like okay, here is the formula, go learn it, but show the beauty and what we have achieved as a species. Imagine if there is like an ant in New York, and the ant had mapped out the whole of New York and had like a rough idea of how other cities looked and felt, and if that ant started teaching other ants, it would be like mind-boggling.
Sure.
But that's what human beings have done. I mean, look at what we have managed to map out.
Sure.
In terms of knowledge.
Right.
This is crazy.
Right.
Right. And to provide that that wonder and pride of what the human species has managed to do among the damage, but also great things that we have to do, I felt was very important, and that was the idea of this workshop. And we were thinking of how many, we had like spot for about 100 kids, and there was this question of how do you select kids for this class? And there were many suggestions, and one of the leading suggestion was to do a test and get kids who passed the test to go to the class. And it kind of hit me that, oh my God, if you are kind of average or below average, the system will systematically filter you out.
Right.
Right? There is nobody is going to take active interest when somebody is not an exact fit to how the system operates. If you're a little bit off, your inequality or the gap will continuously raise.
Yeah.
And when you are out of the school, you have already given up
Right.
about the beauty of maths or science or any of this.
Which is the case in most school systems in the world.
Absolutely.
Well, maybe not most. I mean, Europe's got their act together, I think.
Right.
But in the US or in India is super competitive.
Right.
To get to the top schools.
Absolutely.
You have to be the best performer, and then filters out a lot of people. So was that the genesis of your idea of the special needs, or was there another event that happened that opened you up to that world?
Right. So, I mean, actually, this was still not special needs. We were kind of thinking, hey, there is a bunch of students in a class who are invisible to the system. They just come and go, but nobody would pay real attention.
Right.
So we thought, okay, we will start a company which is focused on this group to personalize stuff, right? And school at the end of the day is like public transport.
Right.
It doesn't come and pick you from your door.
Right.
Right. You have to go
right.
somewhere before the bus can pick you up.
Right.
And it's not going to drop you back at your door. Right. You need to kind of do the last mile yourself. And that is, in some cases, if the parents are very engaged and equipped, they would do that last mile, and those kids would be very successful. If there is a great neighbor, a great tuition teacher, if you're lucky,
right,
that would happen to you. If you're unlucky, that's it.
Yeah.
Right. So that was the insight. We said, wow, that's a huge opportunity.
Right.
Of great talent.
Right.
Missed by every generation.
Right.
Because we couldn't address this problem.
Right. And in India, there really isn't education for the people who get filtered out, right?
No. Yeah.
There's no community college system or trade schools, but there are, right?
There are. There are. I mean, you have a lot of universities, but the difference between the top and the next year is so big. Right. It's you got to do it on your own.
Right.
The system is just like a small layer.
Right. So you just saw this massive gap between the kids who get filtered up and the kids who get filtered down.
Right.
And there's a massive gap in that space, and you identified that and you said we need to do something there.
Yeah. That was the genesis.
That was the first principles of the whole idea.
Yeah. And also to kind of bring, so my background in healthcare meant you do case management. You don't put patients in one classroom and say, okay, everybody take this medicine now.
Right.
Right. That's how school systems are.
Right.
And to some extent it's valuable, but beyond that doesn't.
Right.
So you got to personalize. You need to treat every individual separately. So we built, we were looking at tech, we partnered with an adaptive learning company and created 2 centers in Draper to basically get some hands-on experience of how is it possible to personalize education. So we were trying to teach maths, and so the team had like a maths teacher, a psychologist, a student success manager who would do the planning and coordination on behalf of the student, work with the parent, with the teacher, with the psychologist, and see how the kid is doing.
So you created almost like a whole new system of teaching the kids in that gap, where you just didn't throw a textbook at them, but you sort of created, I guess, an ecosystem of different components that would help the student get through and learn more.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That was the idea. And in about 6 months, we had worked with about 200 kids, and with varying degrees of success. And as we tried to understand what, I was very naive in thinking, okay, we just have to, the kids don't understand the technical concept, you just teach them differently and you're done. That was kind of the mental model.
Right.
And we did kind of consider some of the psychological aspects. That's why we had a counselor, a psychologist in the team, but it wasn't deep enough. Right.
So you didn't see tremendous success with this new model.
I mean, we kind of we saw kids were super happy to be part of that. You'd have like all smiles.
Right.
because people, kids were treated with dignity and respect, and it was a very different environment we had created. Kids were very happy, but what I learned from that was that, hey, this problem is like, we have not even touched the surface of the problem, because the reasons why a kid is not doing well academically are so many.
Sure.
Right? On one end of the spectrum, you have the special needs. I have, I have a wiring in my brain which is different than a neurotypical kid,
right?
Because of autism or because of any other, conditions. Or it could be on the other side. I could be from a family which is, I'm the first person in the whole history of my family to go to a school. Right? When I go back home, there is nothing at home to, there's nobody.
There's no support. There's no one that can help you with the homework. There's no one that encourages you to continue learning, etc. So the insight then there is a lot of other reasons why these kids are not being successful, and did that then lead you to say, wow, there's this whole special needs area? Like, I'm trying to understand what drove that insight to say, wow, this is an amazing opportunity to make a difference.
Right. So I was speaking to a lot of people at that time, and we happened to meet with a school in Bangalore, and I was describing our approach to the head of the special needs, and they call it the psychosocial department, and she said, hey, this is the tech special needs actually need. It's like a multiple people need to coordinate. It's not, we have always believed it's a team sport. It's not like one teacher, being this hero.
Right.
And so our technology, or our prototype at that time was built around this idea. And when I showed to her, she was like, this is absolutely needed in special needs. Right. And there is a lot of struggle here for both the educator and the families. And then she kind of introduced me to that area. We were like, boom, the switch was like on. This is like, wow, if we solve this problem, we can solve all the other problems way more easily. Right.
So it's almost sort of like you were discovering what was the missing link in the education space, in the school, and then you got introduced to the special needs area, and that's when the light bulb went off.
Yeah.
You said, this is exactly what we should be focusing on.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So then maybe you can, because I don't know much about how education is done in the special needs area, and I'm sure it's different country by country, but generally, how is the education delivered for special needs children today, and then how is Ability trying to do something different? And what's the missing link between what you're trying to do and what's being done today?
Right. Special needs, you could say is like is where education meets healthcare. Right.
I like that definition. Yeah.
Right. So like special needs is a umbrella term for so many things. Right. So you have you have hearing impaired, visual impaired, intellectual impairment. I have neurological conditions like autism, and so basically it's like a wide variety of issues. Right? It's almost like a hospital in some sense.
Sure.
Right? But in this case, you have unlike in a hospital where you have so many specialists, in a school you can have only one person.
Right.
Right. So this one person has to be the brain surgeon as well as doing
teacher.
the plastic surgery.
Right.
So it's like you got to be like a master of so many things, and which is like an impossible ask.
Right.
And on piling on top of this is the lack of awareness. With parents, with the school system, with the teachers, and so on. Right? And all of this makes it almost impossible actually to operate well.
Right. So it sounds like your insight then was special needs is such a complicated subject matter. It's such a complicated education need because it's healthcare meets education. But the way the problems are being solved today is you throw one person at the problem and you say, take care of these kids. So the insight is we have to bring a healthcare approach, and we have to bring almost sort of you have to create an ecosystem, right? And that was the insight. And so then how is Ability, what are you guys doing to sort of create that?
Right. And I want to briefly talk about another co-founder who became part of the team.
Right.
Lily, who's a friend of mine. We had worked together for 20 years now. And she was like operations manager when I was working in International SOS.
Right.
So we had implemented a lot of tech together. And she went on and started a home care company.
What was that called?
Called Homage. I think you met her.
Oh, yeah. Wait, this is in Singapore.
Once. It's in Singapore, yeah.
That's the elderly care.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That was a bit of a it's a pretty well-known company in Singapore,
yeah, it's a pretty well-known company. And she wanted to take a break from that. And so at that time, I kind of said, hey, Lily, come to India, check this out.
Yeah.
And she came to India.
Yeah.
And she fell in love with that.
Yeah. Was she living in the school as well?
Yeah, of course. Nobody escapes.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah. And she was like, wow, this is amazing,
Right.
This because we would speak to parents and parents would cry, and because you're helpless, you don't know what to do, and with kids it's the anxieties are multiplied.
Sure.
Right. And she joined, and with her background, she had the experience of a marketplace type model, which Homage is. But also, her background in operations and her background in all of this, dramatically improved our, how much we could bite as a company.
Sure. And so sounds like a perfect team in the sense that it's you, her, and it's just two of you.
Both of us are like the
main co-founders.
The main co-founders in terms of the day-to-day work. And Ashutosh, coming from an education background, provided a lot of the initial spark, and continued to provide that, that bouncing board.
Sure.
In terms of how to think about this.
Right.
Because he runs a school with about 6,000 kids.
Right.
And associated with so many other schools.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of the team. And to answer your question earlier in terms of what do we bring to the table.
Right.
So there is like an ecosystem type model.
Yeah.
In special needs, like parents work together. Because if a child with autism need like a speech therapist, an occupational therapist, a behavior therapist, sometimes a shadow teacher and a special educator. So there are quite a number of people work together.
Right.
But they work together without tech most of the time, and so that's an area that's a low-hanging fruit to pick. But I think the problem that we really want to solve is to say, given the variety of conditions, can a special educator figure out what needs to be done in a particular point in time in a much more intelligent fashion? So can I make an average special educator a great special educator?
Right. Okay. So that's the main. So if you had to distill down, the one main problem you're trying to solve is you're trying to give knowledge, information, and tools to an educator, a special needs educator,
right,
to make that person much more capable of making a decision on a certain case,
right,
which they may not have in general.
Yeah.
And how exactly are you doing that?
So, so this is like a marathon.
Right.
We have just near the starting line. Sorry. And the first thing is to digitize. because you got to have the data
Right.
in one place.
Right.
Then you need every team member to be looking at the data in the same format,
Right.
and start collaborating on that. Right. That's what we have done so far.
Right. Gotcha. So right now it seems like the special needs ecosystem is very much paper-based, right? There's not a lot of data, information, knowledge that you can actually plug into
Right.
whatever platform you're building. So you're now starting to digitize a lot of the day-to-day stuff and feed that data into your platform,
Right.
to then make better decisions.
Yeah. And there are some amazing work done on specific areas, right? I mean, there are some great apps for autism. There are some great apps for cerebral palsy, and there are some great stuff. But what is missing most of the time is to deal with that variety, right? How do we orchestrate across all of this, right? As a special educator, I need to deal with 7 or 8 different conditions, and how can I do that effectively? Is one area. The other area is also from a parent perspective. Let's say in the developed world, the government would fund a lot of this treatment.
Sure.
But in a developing world, you're on your own, almost on your own. So the parent gets very actively engaged. There's no other choice. Right. So this is another insight. So empowering the parent is critical.
Right. And are you building ability for the developing markets, or is it more sort of universal?
The developing market is where I think the pain is underserved.
Right. Because there's not a lot of support from, I guess, government for funding or educating the special needs area. So I'm guessing the developing markets would be like India, Southeast Asia,
absolutely.
maybe even like Africa.
Yeah, Africa, South America. So I mean, our focus currently in Asia, but I think as we understand more and more, there is no reason why we couldn't expand to other places.
Right. Yeah, this is fantastic. The thing I like about this conversation is, I remember when you were talking to me 2 years ago about your old venture that you shut down. Yeah, you had no passion. You had it was sort of like very much mechanical, right? But this time around, you're so it's very clear that you're super excited about the possibilities of what you're doing. You're super passionate about it, and you're super into it, right? It's very, very clear. So, and this is an interesting topic, because I think a lot of people go through this, where you're working on something and it becomes just a nagging endeavor. How did you? Of course, you went to New York and found inspiration, but maybe you can talk about advice to other people who may be in the same situation, where they're just hating what they're doing, and they need to find inspiration to work on something that they really, really care about. How do you do that?
Right. I mean, I think there are 2 key principles. I mean, one, I feel like Lily, who's my co-founder, said this, and it was like a light bulb moment for me. It's like, who are you helping? At the end of the day,
right?
Can you relate to that person? Do you have empathy for that person? I think that's like that's an important motivator, right? Once that is clear, there is like the product market fit. There is the founder market fit. Right. I think that's like I really did not appreciate enough. Right. The reason why I worked in international SOS so long was because it's very clear. Whatever you do actually changes somebody's life. Somebody's an emergency because of you have a little role in changing that situation for that person.
Right.
Right. That's like, that's a motivation that's really deep and strong. And we don't generally appreciate how big that difference is. Right? How much you're willing to suffer. For example, how much I was willing to suffer for a salesperson's life to get better was not as big as a special needs parent.
Right. So the results are much more tangible. You can touch it, feel it, see it.
Right.
You can see the results. You can, and you have like a much more emotional attachment to the outcome. And so, Ability is how old now? A year?
2 years actually.
2 years now.
Yeah.
So it's still very early.
Yeah.
And are you seeing some success, or is this still very much in a development phase?
So some success, in the sense we have built a community of about 14,000 people globally, and I think we have gotten overwhelming response to what we do. Yesterday I was speaking to one of the parents who attend our webinars quite regularly, and he was like very, very thankful for what we do. I was like quite moved by what he said about how he benefits from what we do. I think we have, through a series of webinars, we have made a positive difference to a lot of people. Currently we have our app in a couple of schools, serving about 800 kids. And in that sense, we have kind of broken through something. We have a much better understanding of the space, the challenges ahead, and how we could potentially solve those challenges. But like I said, this is like a marathon.
Yeah.
This is like a long, long way to go.
And I'm guessing the business model would be, once you have the tools completely functional, and this would be something schools would buy. They would buy the solution set.
Right.
And so this is a sort of a B2B
company, it's a B2B2C type model. So we are a SaaS meets marketplace model.
Okay. Right. So I'm guessing parents would probably
also
be
our actual users.
Right. So do you, like, what's your, I know it's still very early, but what's your overall sort of vision for Ability? Like, where do you want it to be in 5 years from now?
Right. I mean, I think, one of my other interests is in transhumanism. Right. And I think we have spoken about this in the past. Because technology is going to change a lot of things. For example, if I was living in 1200, and if I had like a 5+ vision challenge, and I'm homebound. I can't go out, and my life is over. Right. And I kind of feel that's where a lot of special needs are today. And I kind of did this visual. So you have like disability here and an Olympian here, right? Let's say if I have a polio in both my legs, right? If you draw me in the graph, I'm here. An Olympic athlete is here, right? And so that's what we see today. What I feel, given 20 years, the Olympic athlete, the natural Olympic athlete will be here. What I could do with technology will be here. It's a level playing field for both, right? This is what's going to happen. You might have seen the Neuralinks, recent experiments.
Sure.
And I think this is just the beginning. We are going to blow a lot of what we call disability away, is what I believe. And I think that's kind of where we want to go as a company, right? Because last mile access is a huge problem here. Even with assistive tech today, for somebody who can't see, there could be a reader of a textbook, and many assisting technologies that assist. A small percentage of the disabled population have access to it.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, this your vision for the company is fantastic, and it's such a deep topic, because the way you're approaching it seems like you're approaching it from the perspective of, if you have special needs, if you have disabilities, then how do we fix those? But then on the other side, I just finished reading the book Hacking Darwin,
Right.
which
Right.
then talks about, hey, can we actually, and the science is already here, right?
Yeah.
In terms of genetic sequencing.
Absolutely.
Can we actually even prevent? Can we prevent from certain disabilities to happen in the first place?
Yeah.
Right. But that's a much more controversial sort of topic, because you're sort of self-selecting,
Right.
and almost sort of engineering better outcomes, right? But yes, but you're thinking a bit more. If people are born with special needs or disabilities, then how do you, using technology, help them learn better, and level the playing field a bit more?
In a virtual, let's say if my office of the future is in virtual reality, whether I can walk or not doesn't really matter.
Right.
So I could do, I could be connected to a robot and do whatever I want to do. Right. So I think what we call as disabilities, are a temporary feature in the history of the world. Right. It is like really like, it's like a local constraint.
Right. I think you found the company, or at least the problem that you want to solve. I think seems like you found the problem you want to solve, which seems like a great founder fit, because you're interested in these topics, plus your background in technology, your background in healthcare, merging the two together seems like a perfect sort of founder fit, which is great. And how are you, very early stage company, have you guys raised funding for this? What's the capital environment?
So we have raised one round, and we are in the process of raising the second round, small amounts, like a seed capital types. So I think we are good for a year or so of runway at this point.
Right.
And we have a few experiments to succeed over the next few months. Then that would set us up to raise serious capital to scale this. Right.
So the funding you raised has been angel funding.
Angel funded, yeah.
Right. This is great. And when you get to, seems like you're not currently fundraising, but when you get to the point where you start fundraising, who would be the right investors that you would want to seek out? Right.
I mean, I think this is a conversation that we have a lot. I mean, I think as a startup, you're always raising money. Right. And that's kind of how we see it. We are constantly thinking of in the fundraise mode.
Right.
I think that so far we have been lucky with the investors.
Right.
So who kind of align with the vision of the company, who really care about this, right? And patient capital, right? So because we are building this company for the long run.
Right.
This is not something which we want to flip in the next few years.
It's a marathon, as you said.
It's a marathon.
So the angel investors that have invested, were they your previous investors as well, or these are new investors? And how did you end up finding these angel investors?
So these are people we know.
Right.
These are people we know, who have kind of known us and trust us, so that's kind of our current investors. And I think the next round of investors are kind of going to the next concentric circles.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think we are looking to speak to people who have that a long-term vision and ambition
Right.
to solve problem like this, like 93 million kids with special needs in the world. And I think, if a really small fraction gets any attention,
Right.
and there are 1 billion people with disabilities in the world, that's a crazy number.
Yeah.
Right.
Huge market to solve for.
Yeah.
So in terms of the right types of investors that you foresee would be investors that are interested in the mission, right, which is really education for the disadvantaged, I suppose. Right. And so these would be institutional investors that are interested in education, or do you have any names in mind, or still trying to figure that out?
Still trying to figure that out, and also, it'll be really interesting to see if there are some interesting funding models that could, like, is it possible for us to crowdfund this, for example? Because, if somebody, if you speak to most of the professionals in special needs, you'd see that they were working in some other field. They have a child with special needs. They realize the gap. They become a special educator. This is a story I've heard many times.
Right.
I would love some of them to be our investors, because then we need investors and the culture in the company to be very mission driven, right? As we grow bigger and bigger, it's very easy to be more focused on profits than impact.
Right.
Not that profit is not important. I think we are a for-profit company. It's very important, but it should be not only for profit. And
I think this is a really good time to be building a company, a business like this, because I think there's a lot of more interest and focus on impact-driven companies, because I think the pandemic has really opened up people's eyes to a lot of gaps in the world, and so education seems to be an area of interest that's had a resurgence, and especially impact companies that are commercializing impact in the sense it's a real business. There's a business model behind it. Which is great. Okay, well, this has been great, Balaji.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
I love that you have finally sort of found the problem set that you want to solve, and you're actively building a company around that. You have done a lot of different ventures when you were young. If you had to go back to your to your younger self and when you were taking out loans at 50% interest rate, what advice would you give yourself, your 18-year-old self or 19-year-old self? I would say 17-year-old self.
Right. I would say that intern for talented people.
I like that.
Yeah, do it for free.
Yeah.
Pay money to be interned.
Yeah.
For really good people.
Okay, perfect. That's great advice. If anyone's listening to this, interested in the education space, Ability is creating an awesome technology-enabled education company around the needs of special kids who don't really have technology solutions, especially in the emerging markets or in the developing world. Please get in touch with Balaji, and this has been. I love what you're doing. I think it's super impactful, useful, and I think you can build an awesome business around this.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you, Balaji.
Thanks a lot, Vikram. Thank you.